Hey guys, does the 3dfx Voodoo 3 render games with 16-bit colors better than other graphics cards? We start with an ATI Radeon to have a look at what 16-bit color looks like on this card. The game running in the background is Incoming. Now this game does support 32-bit colors. It's not a game I would recommend playing on a Voodoo 3. If you have a faster GeForce or Radeon that supports 32-bit colors, you're better off playing the game on such a card. However, this game has a lot of transparency effects and textures blended over other textures, and it's a good showcase of what the 16-bit image quality can look like. What we can see on the screen is a lot of dithering, some sort of a pixelation or grain effect, and that's basically a trick to trick the eye in having more colors than you actually have, and it's very noticeable. It gives the image quite a rough and raw and grainy texture look, and we will later see what the Voodoo 3 does and how it actually achieves a better image. To see all the details, you should watch this video at 4K on a large television. Let's quickly switch over to a Radeon 7000 with DVI output, just in case you're wondering if the VGA signal quality is to blame, but no, we can see the same effects going on here. Yes, 16-bit on a ATI Radeon looks this bad. Another game we will use to investigate the issue is System Shock 2. This game only supports 16-bit colors, so here the Radeon or GeForce will not give you an advantage. You can't play the game at 32-bit colors, you have to use 16 bits, and this is where the Voodoo 3 really shines. On the Voodoo 3, you need to go into the graphics driver, and there's an option called 3D filter quality. You need to set this to high to enable a 2x2 output filter. And then there's another option, it's called alpha blending, and you have an option between sharper and smoother, and we will look at that in more detail. Both of these options, sharper and smoother, have advantages and downsides, so we've got some screenshots and video footage coming up. The system we are working with today is a slot 1 mainboard from Open with the Intel 440BX chipset. We have an Intel Pentium 3 running at 600 MHz and 256 MB of SD-RAM from Crucial. So back to Incoming. We will switch back and forth between the ATI Radeon, that's the 7200, and the 3dfx Voodoo 3. We're running the game at 800 by 600 with VSync enabled and at 60 Hz. The image of the Voodoo 3 is a little bit brighter. If you don't like that, you can go into the driver settings and reduce the gamma setting. But we can clearly see that the dithering is heavily reduced. The image is much smoother and nicer. And I even found one screenshot where the Voodoo 3 just looks much nicer. I will zoom in at a specific part where you can see, it's a huge difference. I couldn't believe it at first. I read a lot about this topic, but seeing it with high quality captures and comparing it, the difference is massive. Let's switch over to System Shock 2, and again we're switching back and forth between the two video cards, and again the Voodoo 3 is a little bit brighter and does a much better job at cleaning everything up. The dithering is heavily reduced, everything looks smoother, but there's still enough detail there. So there's a bit of a trade-off. You will lose a little bit of sharpness and detail with the Voodoo 3 output filter, but I think in motion, when you're playing the game, it's a really nice compromise. Now, coming back to the issue with the textures layered on top, here we have some smoke, and we can see some sort of a grid or texture pattern going on the Voodoo 3, and this has to do with the output filter not working too well if textures are overlaid. Basically calculation errors, they magnify, and then you get such effects. So that's the only negative I could find with the alpha blending set to high, but everything else looks a lot nicer in my opinion. If you switch the alpha blending to smoother, yes, the image will look a lot smoother. Let's start by checking out Incoming. There's one issue, so we stay zoomed out. If you look at the sky on the Voodoo 3, we can see some banding going on. So this is the output filter working quite heavily, and in some situations like the sky in incoming, it does not look that nice. You can see heavy banding. Now, switching over to System Shock 2, I couldn't find an example of the banding issue. Maybe that's mostly with games that use 32-bit colors or have 32-bit textures. Remember, System Shock 2 is a 16-bit game, so everything has been designed for 16-bit output, and the alpha blending set to smoother makes everything nice and smooth. The dithering is gone, even with the smoke. So in high motion scenes, playing the game, yeah, maybe it looks a little bit softer, but I think it's a nice trade-off. We don't get that dithering and the pixelation and the grain. And the game, I think it is more immersive, less distraction from you actually playing the game. So guys, we have a couple of takeaways. Firstly, if the game supports 32-bit colors, don't play it on a Voodoo 3, play it on a GeForce or on a Radeon, it will look much nicer. Secondly, games that support 16-bit colors only will look much nicer on the Voodoo 3, and you have a couple of options in the driver, especially the alpha blending. You can toggle between sharper and smoother. With the sharper option, you might get some grain, some pattern effect going on with smoke and other effects where textures are layered on top of each other. With the smoother option, you might get some banding in sky textures in other areas, and the image might look a little bit too soft for your liking, so definitely try out the options and see what looks best for you. So there you have it, guys. The Voodoo 3 does indeed make old games that support 16-bit colors only look nicer. Now, should we look at other cards? NVIDIA, I don't think it will look much different than the ATI Radeon, but what about a Matrox or a Power VR? I heard that these cards have high quality image going on. Let me know in the comments. Also, what is your take on the whole 16-bit quality with the Voodoo 3? An interesting fact from the past, the image in the frame buffer on the Voodoo 3 was still a 16-bit image with dithering, so traditional tools that capture screenshots could not display the filter, so it was a little bit misleading. The screenshots did not show how Voodoo 3 actually looked like. There are tools that can sort of calculate the filter, but I don't know how accurate they are. I think it's best to just capture the output, and what you saw in this video on the screen is what you're gonna get on your monitor. So guys, let me know what you think. Leave a comment down below. Let's talk about 16-bit and 32-bit color quality and your experiences with the Voodoo 3. And yeah, give it a thumbs up. Share the video with your friends, and I shall see you soon with another one.